because Americans have not yet lived to live beyond the color line, to live beyond ethnicity. They still practice pervasively discrimination based on race in American society.
What is it about, Michael? What is it about? Let's get to the core of that question.
I think we have to get to the core because I don't want to leave so quickly the issue of the Declaration of Independence in 1776, because I think it all starts there in terms. I think the Declaration of Independence of 1776, you know, Heather challenged us. It was a revolutionary document. I think all school children, speaking of education, must read that document, because before you can criticize where we have come and where we come from, you got to understand the revolutionary fervor and the spirit of 1776. When in the course of human events, a people finds it necessary to dissolve political bands with another people.
It's a phenomenal document.
It's a phenomenal document. Not only that,
it hasn't been changed.
And it also talks about the natural rights of mankind. Unalienable rights of mankind. But this is where everything begins, because we're now in a period where people think government gives us rights. No.
Yes.
We have natural rights, equality, the rights of humankind, which people fought, and this is where the hope comes. In 1776, you know, when Crispus Attucks was before 1776, and there's a statue in Boston Commons in tribute to Crispus Attucks, who first fell. But I think it was James Russell Lowell who said, when a blow is struck for freedom, a slave, wherever he cowers, feels his soul with an incline. That's the revolutionary spirit of 1776.
Now Pauline Meyers has a very interesting book. She's from MIT. And it's called The American Scriptures. And she talks about how Tom Jeff, along with other people, and let's be honest about this, he did the draft, but other people participated in the actual writing. But he wrote that. Later on, that was, interestingly enough, taken out. That we are all created equal. The Declaration of Independence is one of the most beautiful pieces of literature in the world, bar none. What happened after it is what I'm concerned about. Here was a man who was a slaveholder, there's no doubt, though he was a benevolent slaveholder, though he had an affair with a black woman. All of that notwithstanding, was able to write this incredible piece of almost feels celestial, almost feels heavenly. Somehow he was inspired to write this.
He borrowed from the great philosophers of the world.
Well, we know that he borrowed from the French as well.
Yeah.
The question is, how far have we come in implementing that? That we are all created equal. That we do have education is not a privilege. It's a right.
I think the fact that we're sitting around this table discussing it keeps reminding us how far we have come. Because every time that repression has become to a boil in this country, there is always a group of people who stand up and remind us from whence we came in this country.
But I also think, though, there's a major disconnect for a good number of citizens who have no sense whatever as far as the Declaration of Independence is concerned. I think it goes to the heart of the disparity that's taking place in our society, both in the area of education, economic gain, and even though there has been tremendous progress, at the same time, like Lorraine, we just did a poll as well, and it's our State of Black New York poll. And interestingly enough, education, which I thought would come to the top, was not at the top. Education really came out at number 5. Wow. And economic development was the #1 priority in the black community, which also tied into jobs and unemployment, and then police brutality was number 2. And then crime and violence was number 3. And it was an interesting mix.
Testing a moment in history.
Yeah, and it was an interesting mix because as a result of that, it made me look at things a little differently, because that's why we did the poll. It wasn't just to see what Michael is saying, or I'm saying, or this other person saying, what the majority of the people are saying from New York City. And it also talked about both the displacement of blame as far as external factors that are contributing to this disconnect. But with our poll, and I think also with Lorraine's poll, there was a lot of introspection as well, dealing with educational problems faced by our youth. I just want to tie in one point, because we asked a very specific question. Are young black men better off today than 30 years ago?
Great question.
And then we also posed, are young black men better off today than 50 years ago? And I chose those 2 periods of time, 30 years post 68, the fervor of the movement at that time, and 50 prior to Brown versus Board of Education. And over 50% of the people said that our young black men are not better off than 30 years ago, and 35% said they're not better off than 50 years ago. And that, to me, goes to the heart of the disconnect.
But that's not surprising at all.
Is this perception or reality?
The black marriage rate was not at the rock bottom levels that it was. Young black men, by and large, in the black community are growing up without fathers. And this is a recipe for failure. There's many extremely competent single mothers out there, but we know statistically that if you grow up in a community without fathers, your chances of dropping out in school, of failing in school, of becoming a criminal, of becoming a teen mother are many times
Children are not without
So
fathers.
that's been, as
they may
far
not
as
be in
I'm
a home,
concerned,
but they know where they are.
The most important.
Michael, you were saying?
Yeah, the children are not fathers. I think this is a great myth that's going around in society today, and it goes back to the 60s. The myth that, you know, that unwed mothers somehow, unwed mothers and the absence of fathers in the home contributes to the criminal delinquency of quote-unquote black youth, of black men, the footlooseness of black men. Come on.
How is that
I don't like to blame the victim. Look, I know lots of people who came from single-parent families, and they have made great successes of themselves.
Absolutely, there are plenty of
great excuse me, I
families.
didn't interrupt you while you were talking. And I think it's very important that when you go to school, for example, that teachers have high expectations of all children. Don't ask, is your father at home, or is your mother not wedded to your father? It has absolutely no relevance to what the teacher brings to that child in the classroom in terms of the basics, in terms of the fundamentals. High expectations of teachers, competent teachers, resources in the school, small classes, and that's where the key is. Getting our kids educated, and all of our kids educated in the civics of America, which means having identification with the American dream,
Michael,
and the opportunity to pursue it.
You're absolutely right. I'm going to throw out, and people say I do this often, a sort of personal example. I had a teacher named Ethel Shapiro who knew that I didn't have a father. Yet she taught me. I got syntax. I learned Torah, Talmud, Sholem Aleichem, you name it, and I learned Shakespeare and everything else. She was a phenomenal teacher.
As did I.
I had a great junior high school, 263, right in the heart of Frenchmen and Roman law territory and chaplain. So she was a great teacher and a great inspiration to me, and I am who I am today because of her. However, the dysfunction of a home without a father did affect me eventually. And I did end up going to jail, and I did end up going for gang fight in which a kid was murdered. So I'm an example of both things that happened at the same time.
And with the poll, see, what we wanted to do with the poll is really get people's opinion as far as what those priority issues are. We asked the question, do you feel that teachers, and we didn't distinguish white, black, or Latino teachers have higher expectations, lower expectations, or the same expectations for black students as compared to white students? And again, the majority of respondents said that teachers have lower expectations for black students over white students. And it goes back to Lorraine's point, it's not a simple answer. There's so many issues. And getting it back to the Declaration of Independence and the issues as far as where we are in a society right now, I think overall we've lost that civic engagement as part of our
civic
life.
virtue, it's
and we
called,
don't have a clear understanding. We don't release children from school to really become part of the civic life in their community. And I think our challenge as adults is to re-engage our society and our children and adults, because it's not just children, but adults as well, who don't know the Declaration of Independence.
We have to hold up, folks. We have to take a break, and we're caught between Michael's very, very real concern for the externalization of this stuff. Where do we begin to put the blame? And Heather's very real internalization. When do we begin to shore up ourselves so that we can reach those goals? We'll have more on what Independence Day means today when we come back.
Our heroes proved in